They say it started with a boy, Josiah, only 11, running barefoot through a freezing night after seeing one more cruelty he could never forget. Behind him rode 3 bounty hunters, men who made their living dragging black children back in chains, laughing as they did it. Folks say those men were confident, too confident. But then the boy crossed paths with Corporal Isaiah Caldwell, a black Union soldier heading home from the war, carrying scars no doctor could see. Caldwell looked at Josiah and saw his own past staring back at him, small, afraid, and hunted. And that's when the legend begins, snow falling, traps set in the dark. 3 armed hunters creeping toward a broken farmhouse, and Caldwell waiting for them with the calm of a man who's already seen death up close. People whisper that none of those hunters made it back alive. But the real question is this: when justice fails again and again, what kind of man does a soldier become to protect one black child running for his life? Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The heat clung to everything that evening. It pressed down on the wooden quarters like an invisible hand. Josiah crouched behind the woodpile, his small fingers digging into the rough bark. Splinters bit into his palms, but he didn't move, couldn't move. Rachel stood in the center of the yard, her back straight, despite the blood running down her arm. The overseer's whip cracked again. The sound split the thick air like thunder. She didn't scream. Josiah wanted to run to her. His legs trembled with the need to move, to shout, to do something. But Rachel had told him to hide. She'd made him promise. When the overseer came looking for him after he'd accidentally spilled the water bucket during the afternoon work, Rachel had stepped between them. She'd said it was her fault, that she'd told him to hurry. The overseer knew she was lying. Now the whip fell again and again. Each strike made Josiah flinch. His whole body shook. Hot tears ran down his cheeks, cutting through the dust on his face. The other slaves stood in a silent semicircle. Their faces showed nothing. They'd learned long ago that showing anything, anger, grief, even sympathy, could bring the whip down on their own backs. Lantern light flickered across their features, turning them into shadows. Finally, the overseer stopped. He was breathing hard. Sweat stained his shirt. He spat into the dirt near Rachel's feet. "Next time," he said, his voice rough, "I won't be so gentle." He walked away. His boots crunched on the gravel path leading back to the big house. The moment he disappeared, the slaves moved. They helped Rachel to her feet. She swayed but stayed standing. Josiah scrambled from his hiding place and ran to her. His arms wrapped around her waist. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her side. "I'm so sorry, Rachel." Her hand touched the top of his head. Her fingers were trembling. "Hush now." "Get inside." They helped her into the quarters. The small cabin smelled of sweat and cooking smoke. Someone brought water. Someone else tore strips of cloth for bandages. Rachel lay on her thin mattress, her breathing shallow. Josiah sat beside her. The other slaves gave them space, moving to their own corners. The cabin fell into the familiar quiet of exhaustion. Outside, cicadas sang their endless song. Rachel's eyes found his in the dimness. "Josiah," she whispered, "come here." He leaned closer. "You have to go." Her words were barely audible. "Tonight, before he sets his eyes on you again." "No?" Josiah shook his head hard. "I won't leave you. You have to." She reached up and touched his cheek. "I can't watch him hurt you. I can't." "But—" "Listen to me." Her grip tightened on his arm. "Old Turner knows the way. He'll tell you. Promise me you'll go." "Promise?" Josiah couldn't speak. His throat closed up tight. From the corner, a raspy voice spoke. "Boy, come here." Old Turner lay on his pallet, his body little more than bones wrapped in dark skin. He'd been old for as long as Josiah could remember. Some said he'd been on the plantation longer than anyone, even the master's father. Josiah moved to his side. Turner's eyes were cloudy, but his voice stayed steady. "You listening?" "Yes, sir." "Good." Turner coughed. The sound rattled in his chest. "When you leave, go north. Stay off the roads. You'll come to a crooked willow first. Big old tree with branches that bend down like arms reaching for the ground. Can't miss it." Josiah nodded, trying to memorize every word. "Past the willow, you'll find a collapsed fence, made of stone, mostly fallen down now. Follow it east until you hit the shallow branch of the river. Cross there. Water's only knee-deep this time of year. After that," Turner's breath wheezed, "after that, keep the North Star at your back come dawn. Find the next town. Find free folks if you can." "How will I know them?" "You'll know." Turner's hand found his. The old man's skin felt like paper. "You're a smart boy. You'll know." The hours crawled past. Josiah sat with Rachel, holding her hand while she drifted in and out of sleep. The cabin grew darker. One by one, the other slaves fell silent. Outside, the plantation settled into its nighttime rhythm. The master's dogs barked once, then went quiet. Rachel squeezed his hand. "Go now," she breathed. "Please." Josiah pulled the torn blanket from the foot of her mattress. Rachel reached up and unclasped the small locket from around her neck. Their mother's locket. She pressed it into his palm. "So you remember," she said. "So you remember you're loved." He wanted to say something, wanted to tell her he'd come back for her, that he'd find a way, but the words stuck in his throat. He just nodded and tucked the locket inside his shirt. The door creaked as he slipped out. The night air hit his face, slightly cooler now, but still heavy. He moved between the buildings like a ghost, staying in the shadows. His bare feet made no sound on the packed earth. At the edge of the plantation, he looked back once. The quarters stood dark and silent. Somewhere inside, Rachel lay bleeding because of him. Then he turned and ran. Dawn came slowly. The sky shifted from black to deep blue to pale gray. Josiah's legs burned. His feet were cut and bleeding. But he kept moving, following Turner's directions like a prayer. The crooked willow appeared as the sun broke the horizon, exactly as Turner described, massive and ancient, its branches sweeping toward the ground in long curves. Josiah stopped beneath it, gasping for breath. A cold wind began to blow. It cut through his thin shirt and made him shiver. The air smelled different here, cleaner somehow. Or maybe that was just hope talking. Behind him, miles away on the Dunwich plantation, the master discovered the empty space where Josiah should have been. His roar of anger carried across the fields. Within the hour, 3 horses stood ready in the yard. Silas Rudd checked his rifle with practiced efficiency. His face showed nothing. No anger, no excitement. Just the blank expression of a man starting another day's work. Malcolm Crowe spat tobacco juice into the dirt and grinned. "Boy won't make it far," he said. "They never do." Ephraim Pike studied the ground near the quarters, already reading the story written in disturbed dust and bent grass. He pointed north without a word. The ledger men mounted their horses. The master handed Rudd a slip of paper with Josiah's description and the promised bounty. "Bring him back," the master said. "Alive, if possible. But bring him back." Rudd folded the paper and tucked it into his vest pocket. "We always do." The horses started forward. Their hooves beat a steady rhythm against the earth. The hunt had begun. The morning light came weak and gray through the bare branches. Josiah squinted against it, his eyes burning from lack of sleep. Every part of his body hurt. His feet were the worst, covered in cuts and scrapes that stung with each step. The cold wind that had started at dawn hadn't let up. It pushed through his thin shirt like it wasn't even there. He'd been walking for hours, maybe longer. Time felt strange out here, away from the plantation bells that marked every part of the day. His stomach cramped with hunger. He remembered the last real meal he'd eaten, cornmeal mush 2 mornings ago, before everything fell apart. Before Rachel took the whip for him. Don't think about Rachel. Keep moving. The forest around him was thick with undergrowth. Brambles caught at his pants. Low branches slapped his face. But he pushed forward, following Turner's words like a map written in his mind. The crooked willow was behind him now. He needed to find the collapsed stone fence. A berry bush appeared at the edge of a small clearing. The berries were dark purple, almost black. Josiah had seen slaves eat these kinds before during harvest time. He picked a handful and shoved them in his mouth. They were bitter and made his tongue tingle, but his stomach stopped hurting quite so bad. He found more bushes as he walked, ate what he could reach. His fingers turned purple from the juice. A creek cut through the forest ahead. The water ran clear over smooth stones. Josiah dropped to his knees and cupped his hands, drinking until his belly felt swollen. The water was so cold it made his teeth ache. When he stood, he noticed something strange about the ground on the other side of the creek. The dirt was disturbed. Boot prints, large ones, fresh ones. His heart hammered against his ribs. Someone had been here, recently. Josiah backed away from the creek and changed direction, moving deeper into the trees. He walked as quietly as he could, placing each foot with care. Every snapping twig sounded like a gunshot in his ears. Miles behind him, Silas Rudd knelt in the dirt near the crooked willow. His fingers traced the outline of a small footprint. The edges were still sharp. Recent. Got him, he said. Malcolm Crowe leaned against his horse, picking at his teeth with a piece of straw. How far ahead? 6 hours. Maybe 8. Rudd stood and brushed the dust from his knees. He's moving slow, stopping to rest, making mistakes. Ephraim Pike studied a broken branch nearby. Scared, he said. His voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. Real scared. Look here. He doubled back twice before finding the right path. Wasting time. Rudd nodded. He'd tracked dozens of runners over the years, maybe hundreds. They all showed the same patterns. Fear made them careless, made them easy to follow. We'll have him by tomorrow, Crowe said. Day after, at most. Don't get cocky. Rudd swung back into his saddle. Scared animals can be unpredictable. Let's move. The 3 men rode north, following the trail as easily as if Josiah had left signs pointing the way. By midday, Josiah reached the edge of the forest. Open farmland stretched before him. A large farmhouse sat in the distance, smoke rising from its chimney. Closer by, he saw a group of men working to repair a fence. Their voices carried on the wind. Josiah dropped flat to the ground. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. He couldn't go through the open field. They'd see him for sure. But going around would take hours. Hours he didn't have. He waited, watching. The farmhands worked steadily, moving along the fence line. They were coming his way. If he stayed here, they'd find him. Josiah crawled backward into the tree line. His hands sank into cold mud. When he was far enough back, he stood and ran parallel to the field's edge, keeping the trees between him and the workers. His lungs burned. His legs felt like they might give out. But he kept running until the farmhouse disappeared behind him, and the men's voices faded to nothing. The collapsed stone fence appeared just before sunset. Exactly as Turner had described it. Ancient stones tumbled across the ground like a giant's toys. Moss covered most of them. Some had sunk so deep into the earth only their tops showed. Josiah followed it east. His feet moved on their own now. One step, another, another. The sky turned orange, then purple, then black. Stars emerged, cold and distant. A howl cut through the darkness. Then another. Wolves. Josiah's blood went ice cold. He'd heard stories about wolves, how they hunted in packs, how they could smell fear. A building appeared ahead, a barn, half collapsed and listing to one side. The door hung crooked on broken hinges. It was the only shelter he'd seen for hours. He slipped inside. The smell of rot and old hay filled his nose. Small animals rustled in the corners. The roof had holes that showed patches of night sky. It was better than nothing. Josiah found a spot in the corner where the walls still met. He pulled his knees to his chest and wrapped the torn blanket around his shoulders. The wolves howled again, closer now. His eyes wouldn't close. Every sound made him jump. The wind whistling through gaps in the walls. The creak of old wood settling. Something scurrying across the rafters. Then he heard something new. A soft pattering sound on the roof. Snow. It came down harder. Faster. Within minutes, white flakes were drifting through the holes in the roof. The temperature dropped. Josiah's breath came out in visible clouds. He curled tighter into himself, trying to keep warm. His body shook uncontrollably. The cold seeped into his bones. Through the broken door, he watched the snow fall. It covered everything. The ground, the weeds, the collapsed fence in the distance, covering his tracks. Maybe that was good. Maybe the snow would hide where he'd been, or maybe it would trap him. The Ledger men reached a small tavern as the snow began. Rudd led them inside, shaking ice crystals from his hat. The warmth hit them like a wall. The smell of cooking meat and unwashed bodies filled the air. They took a table near the fire. The tavern keeper brought whiskey without being asked. "Storm came early this year," the keeper said. "Pennsylvania line's just 20 miles north. You boys headed that way?" "Maybe," Rudd said. He didn't look up from his drink. "Well, fair warning. They patrol it now. Ever since the war heated up. You're looking for someone specific. You might have trouble once you cross." Crow snorted. "We'll manage." The keeper shrugged and walked away. Pike stared into the fire. "Snow will slow the boy down," he said. "Slow us down too," Rudd replied. "But not as much. We've got horses and supplies. He's got nothing." "Poor little bastard's probably frozen by now," Crow said. He poured himself another drink. Rudd said nothing. He'd seen runners survive worse. Fear and desperation could push a body further than anyone thought possible. But the boy was young, small. In this cold, without proper clothing or food, his chances were dropping by the hour. They'd find him soon enough. Dead or alive, it didn't matter to the Ledger. The bounty would be paid either way. Dawn came with painful brightness. The world had turned white overnight. Snow covered everything. The barn, the fields, the trees beyond. It was still falling, though lighter now. Josiah woke covered in a thin layer of white. Snow had drifted through the roof and settled on his blanket, his hair, his shoulders. He was so cold he couldn't feel his fingers or toes. He tried to stand. His legs barely held him. Every muscle screamed in protest. But he forced himself up, forced himself to move. The collapsed fence was still visible, a dark line cutting through the white. He followed it, limping now. Each step sent pain shooting through his damaged feet. The snow made everything harder. It soaked through his thin shoes, made the ground slippery, hid roots and stones that he tripped over. But he kept moving. North. Always north. Behind him, miles away, the Ledger men finished their breakfast and stepped outside. The storm had passed. Fresh snow covered the ground, but their horses were strong and rested. Rudd swung into his saddle. Crow and Pike followed. They rode north through the snow, 3 dark shapes against the white landscape. Patient, relentless. The distance between hunter and hunted was closing. The road appeared just after noon. Frozen dirt stretched ahead, like a scar through the white landscape. Josiah stumbled onto it, his legs barely holding him upright. His vision swam. Dark spots danced at the edges of his sight. He'd been walking for hours, maybe days. Time had stopped making sense somewhere back in the forest. Each breath felt like swallowing broken glass. His chest ached. His throat burned from the cold air. The frostbite in his fingers had turned them a sickly gray color. When he tried to flex them, nothing happened. They were dead weight at the ends of his hands. The farmhouse emerged from the white like a ghost. It sat back from the road, half hidden behind bare trees. The windows were dark. No smoke rose from the chimney. Abandoned, just like the barn had been. Josiah took 3 more steps toward it. Then his legs gave out. He fell face first into the snow. The cold burned his cheeks. He tried to push himself up, but his arms wouldn't work. His body had finally reached its limit. The world tilted sideways. Everything went gray at the edges. He thought about Rachel. Hoped she was still alive. Hoped the overseer hadn't made things worse for her after he ran. He thought about old Turner, who'd died without ever seeing freedom himself. Then he thought about nothing at all. Isaiah Caldwell heard the body hit the ground from 30 yards away. The sound carried clear in the winter stillness. A soft thump, then silence. He'd been approaching the farmhouse cautiously, checking for signs of habitation. The war had taught him to trust nothing that looked abandoned. Sometimes guerrillas used empty buildings as traps. Sometimes desperate people defended them with violence. But this wasn't an ambush. This was a child, collapsed in the snow. Caldwell broke into a run. His left leg protested. The injury that had gotten him discharged still hadn't fully healed, but he ignored the pain and dropped to his knees beside the small body. A boy, maybe 11 or 12, black, dressed in rags that wouldn't keep a dog warm in this weather. Caldwell pressed 2 fingers to the boy's neck. Pulse was there, faint but steady. Still alive. He scooped the child into his arms. The boy weighed almost nothing, just skin and bones wrapped in torn cloth. Caldwell carried him toward the farmhouse, kicking the door open with his boot. Inside was just as cold as outside, but at least the walls blocked the wind. Caldwell laid the boy on the floor near the fireplace and immediately began gathering wood from the pile beside the hearth. Someone had left behind enough to last through winter. Probably figured they'd come back for it. Within minutes, he had a fire going. The flames caught quickly, spreading warmth through the small room. Caldwell knelt beside the boy and unwrapped the torn blanket. What he found beneath made his jaw tighten. The child's feet were wrapped in cloth that had once been part of a shirt. The fabric was frozen solid, stained dark with old blood. His hands were worse, fingers swollen and discolored from frostbite. Caldwell had seen frostbite before. During the war, after a particularly brutal winter campaign, 3 men in his company had lost fingers. One had lost both feet. He worked carefully, warming the boy's hands in his own, rubbing circulation back into the frozen flesh. The skin felt like ice. Slowly, painfully, color began to return. Not all the way. The damage was deep, but enough to give hope. The boy's eyes snapped open. He jerked backward, gasping, scrambling away from Caldwell until his back hit the wall. "Easy," Caldwell said. He held up both hands, palms out. "I'm not going to hurt you." The boy stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. His whole body shook. Not just from cold, from fear. "You're safe," Caldwell said. His voice was low, calm. The same tone he'd used with spooked horses during the war. "I found you on the road. Brought you inside to warm up. That's all." The boy's eyes darted to the door, then back to Caldwell. Calculating. Looking for an escape route. "You hungry?" Caldwell asked. He reached into his pack and pulled out a piece of dried meat. "Got some jerky here. Not much, but it's something." He held it out. The boy didn't move. "Go on," Caldwell said. "Take it." Slowly, hesitantly, the boy reached forward. His damaged fingers couldn't grip properly, so Caldwell placed the meat directly in his palm. The boy pulled back and tore into it like a starving animal. Caldwell waited until the boy had swallowed a few bites. "Got a name?" The boy nodded but didn't speak. "I'm Isaiah Caldwell, Corporal, U.S. Colored Troops. Recently discharged." He gestured to his leg. "Caught some shrapnel at Petersburg. They sent me home." The boy chewed slowly, watching him. "You run away?" Caldwell asked. Another nod. "From where?" "Dunwick Plantation," the boy whispered. His voice was hoarse from days of cold air. "Virginia." Caldwell's eyebrows rose. "That's a long way to come on foot." "Had directions from old Turner. He told me about a crooked willow and a collapsed fence and the shallow branch." The words came faster now, tumbling out. "He said follow those and I'd reach Pennsylvania. Reach freedom." Caldwell felt something twist in his chest. He'd heard about old Turner. Every black person within 100 miles had heard the stories. The man who'd memorized the path north but never lived to take it himself. "You made it," Caldwell said quietly. "This is Pennsylvania. You're in a free state." The boy's eyes filled with tears. He tried to speak, but couldn't. "What's your name, son?" "Josiah." "Well, Josiah, you did something remarkable. Old Turner would be proud." Caldwell stood and added more wood to the fire. "There's a settlement about 20 miles northeast of here. Black folks who've been free for years. Some of them take in family members who escaped. You got any extended family? Anybody who might be there?" Josiah's face brightened slightly. "My mama used to talk about her sister. Said she got sold years ago to somewhere up north. Said her name was Ruth." "Ruth?" Caldwell repeated. "That's something to go on. We'll find her. Or at least find people who can help." For the first time since waking, Josiah's body relaxed slightly. He took another bite of jerky. Hope flickered across his young face. Fragile, uncertain, but real. Caldwell moved to the window and looked out at the darkening landscape. The sun was setting. They'd stay here tonight, then move at first light. The settlement was only a day's travel if they kept a good pace. Then he saw them. Tracks in the snow. Fresh ones, leading straight toward the farmhouse from the south. 3 sets of boot prints. 3 horses' hoof prints. His blood went cold. Caldwell turned from the window and looked at Josiah. The boy had fallen asleep by the fire, exhausted beyond measure. His small chest rose and fell with steady breaths. Someone was following him. Someone with resources and determination. Someone who'd tracked him all the way from Virginia. Caldwell moved quickly to the fireplace. He grabbed the poker and scattered the burning logs, smothering the flames with ash. The room plunged into darkness. Outside, in the distance, he heard it. The crunch of snow under boots, slow, methodical, coming closer. Caldwell moved through the darkness like a ghost. Every motion was precise, silent, honed by years of war. The farmhouse had a small front porch, half-rotted boards that creaked under weight. He tested each step carefully, marking in his mind which ones would groan loudest. Then he searched the yard for materials. An old wagon sat abandoned near the barn, its wheels sunk into frozen mud. Caldwell pried loose a length of rusted chain, testing its strength. Still solid. He carried it back to the porch and rigged it low across the top step, hidden in shadow. Next came the fallen branches. Winter storms had knocked down dozens of limbs from the oak trees surrounding the property. Caldwell selected the heaviest ones, thick as a man's arm, and propped them against the farmhouse wall. A single rope tied to the door handle would bring them crashing down on anyone who tried to force entry. He found farming tools in the barn. A scythe with a chipped blade, a pitchfork with 2 bent tines, a rusty bear trap someone had left behind, still functional despite years of neglect. Caldwell positioned them strategically, creating a perimeter of pain around the farmhouse. Inside, Josiah slept by the cold hearth. The boy was curled into a tight ball, the torn blanket pulled up to his chin. His breathing was soft and steady. Exhaustion had dragged him down deep. Caldwell knelt beside him for a moment, studying the child's face. So young. Too young to have seen what he'd already seen. Too young to be running for his life through winter snow. But that was the world they lived in. Age didn't matter. Innocence didn't matter. All that mattered was survival. Caldwell stood and moved back to the window. The tracks outside were clearer now in the moonlight. 3 men. They'd stopped about 100 yards out, probably setting up camp for the night. Smart. They knew their quarry was cornered. No need to rush in blind. They'd come at first light. That's what Caldwell would do. Wait for dawn, then move in with clear visibility. He had maybe 3 hours. Caldwell checked his rifle. 18 shots left. His revolver held 6 more. Not ideal, but enough if he made each one count. He'd fought through worse odds at Petersburg. At least here he had the advantage of knowing they were coming. He positioned himself near the window, where he had the best view of the approach. Then he settled in to wait. The sky turned from black to gray. Dawn was coming. Caldwell heard them before he saw them. Boots crunching through snow. Low voices conferring. They weren't trying to be quiet anymore. 3 shapes emerged from the tree line. One tall and lean, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times before. One shorter and bulkier, with the aggressive posture of a man who solved problems with his fists. The third stayed slightly back, watching the ground, reading tracks. The tall one stopped about 50 feet from the farmhouse. "Boy!" he called out. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "We know you're in there. Come on out, and nobody gets hurt." Caldwell didn't respond. He watched them spread out, forming a loose triangle around the building. "We're authorized by the Dunwick plantation to bring you back safe," the tall one continued. "You got family there. Your sister's worried sick about you." Josiah stirred behind Caldwell. The boy's eyes opened, then went wide with terror. Caldwell held up one hand without turning around. "Stay quiet." "Last chance, boy," the tall one said. "Come out now, or we come in and drag you out." Silence. The morning light grew stronger. The shorter one lost patience first. "Hell with this, Silas. I'm going in." He charged toward the porch. His boots hit the steps hard. The hidden chain caught him across the shins. He went down face first, his momentum carrying him forward into the rotted boards. Wood splintered. He crashed through, landing in the crawl space beneath the porch. Caldwell stepped out and fired 2 shots into the air. "Next one goes through flesh." The tall one, Silas, froze. His hand moved toward his gun. "Don't," Caldwell said. His rifle was aimed directly at Silas's chest. "I fought at Petersburg, Antietam, Cold Harbor. Killed better men than you. Don't make me add you to the list." Silas's eyes narrowed. "You're that boy's help? A deserter?" "Discharged. Honorably. Don't matter. You're aiding a fugitive. That's a crime. He's in Pennsylvania. Free state. No fugitive here. Law says otherwise. Law says we can pursue across state lines." The shorter one climbed out of the broken porch, cursing. His face was bloody from the fall. He drew his pistol. Caldwell shot him through the shoulder. The man spun and dropped, screaming. The third one, the tracker, broke for the side of the house. Caldwell tracked his movement through the window, waiting. The man came around the corner and stepped directly into the bear trap. The metal jaws snapped shut on his leg. He went down, howling. Silas pulled his gun. Caldwell fired first. The bullet caught Silas in the chest, punching through his coat. The man staggered backward, shock registering on his face. "Men don't forget blood spilled by your kind," Silas muttered. Then he collapsed into the snow. Caldwell moved quickly. The shorter one was still alive, clutching his wounded shoulder. Caldwell put a bullet through his head. Mercy, not cruelty. The man would have bled out slowly otherwise. The tracker was trapped, screaming, trying to pry open the bear trap. Caldwell approached and fired once. The screaming stopped. Silence fell over the farmhouse clearing. 3 bodies lay scattered in the snow. Dark blood spread out from each one, staining the white ground black. Behind him, Josiah stood in the doorway. The boy's face was pale as death. "Go inside," Caldwell said quietly. "Don't look at this." Josiah didn't move. His eyes were locked on the bodies. Josiah, inside. Now! The boy stumbled backward into the farmhouse. Caldwell gathered the bodies one by one, dragging them to the center of the clearing. He piled dry wood around them, then struck a match. The flames caught quickly, spreading across the makeshift pyre. He watched the fire burn, watched the smoke rise into the gray morning sky. This would bring consequences. He knew that. 3 white men dead at the hands of a black soldier. It didn't matter that they'd come armed. Didn't matter that he'd acted in self-defense. All that would matter was the color of their skin versus his. Caldwell collected their weapons, 3 rifles, 2 pistols, ammunition, and buried them deep in the snow near the tree line. Then he returned to the farmhouse. Josiah sat on the floor, knees pulled to his chest. He was shaking. "We have to go," Caldwell said. "Right now." The boy nodded but didn't move. Caldwell knelt beside him. "What I did out there, it had to be done. You understand that?" "Yes, sir. But it's going to bring trouble. Bad trouble. We need to move fast." Josiah stood on trembling legs. Caldwell gathered their few supplies and helped the boy into his torn coat. They left through the back door, moving northeast through the forest. Behind them, smoke continued to rise from the burning bodies. By the time day fully broke, they were already a mile up the frozen road, leaving behind the smoke of the men who would never make it home. The cold bit through their clothes like teeth. Caldwell and Josiah moved through the forest in silence, their breath forming white clouds in the frozen air. The boy stumbled every few steps, exhausted from days of running, but he didn't complain, didn't ask to stop. Caldwell kept his hand near his revolver. His eyes swept the tree line constantly, searching for movement. Riders could appear at any moment. Word would spread fast once someone found the farmhouse. Josiah clutched the locket tight in his small fist. The metal had gone cold hours ago, but he held it anyway. Caldwell noticed the gesture, a connection to something lost, something he couldn't protect. The war had taught Caldwell what it meant to lose things you couldn't protect. By midday, they reached a dirt road that cut through farmland. Caldwell hesitated. Roads meant visibility, but they also meant faster travel, and right now, speed mattered more than stealth. They walked along the edge, ready to vanish into the trees at the first sign of trouble. The first town appeared just before sunset. A cluster of wooden buildings huddled together like they were trying to keep warm. Smoke rose from chimneys. A few people moved along the main street. Caldwell considered bypassing it entirely, but they needed food, water, and information about what lay ahead. "Stay close to me," he told Josiah. "Don't talk to anyone unless I tell you." The boy nodded. They entered the town as the last light drained from the sky. People turned to stare. An old woman sweeping her porch stopped mid-stroke. 2 men standing outside a general store went quiet. Caldwell walked with his shoulders back, his pace steady. He'd learned in the army how to carry himself, how to project authority, even when surrounded by hostility. A man stepped into their path, middle-aged, with a thick beard and work-worn hands. He looked Caldwell up and down, taking in the worn Union coat, the dark skin, the rifle slung across his back. "You lost, soldier?" "Just passing through," Caldwell said. "With that boy?" "He's with me." The man's eyes narrowed. "Lot of colored soldiers think they own the land now. Think the war changed everything." Caldwell didn't respond. He stepped around the man and continued walking. Behind them, someone spat on the ground, the wet sound of contempt hitting dirt. They reached the general store. Caldwell pushed open the door. The inside smelled of wood smoke and dried meat. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with basic supplies. A clerk stood behind the counter. Young, nervous-looking. Caldwell placed coins on the counter. Bread, dried beef, whatever that buys. The clerk glanced at the coins, then at Caldwell's face. We don't serve your kind here. The coins are the same color as everyone else's. Don't matter. Owner's policy. Caldwell picked up the coins slowly. His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. Where's the next town? 10 miles north. But they won't serve you either. Outside, more people had gathered. Caldwell could see them through the window. A dozen men, maybe more. Some held tools. Others just stood with their arms crossed. He turned to Josiah. We're leaving. They stepped back into the street. The crowd had grown. Faces filled with suspicion and anger stared at them. Caldwell recognized that look. He'd seen it plenty of times during the war. The look of people who saw you as something less than human. That boy stolen property? Someone called out. He's free, Caldwell said. We're in Pennsylvania. Don't look free to me. Looks like you're running him somewhere. We're just traveling. A younger man pushed forward from the crowd. I heard about some hunters going missing couple days back. Said they were tracking a runaway. Caldwell's hand moved closer to his revolver. Don't know anything about that. Sure you don't. Colored soldier shows up with a scared boy right when white men go missing. That's quite a coincidence. The crowd pressed closer. Caldwell could feel the tension building. One wrong word, and this would turn violent. He looked down at Josiah. The boy's eyes were wide with fear. Move aside, Caldwell said firmly. We're leaving. Anyone tries to stop us, they'll regret it. For a moment, nobody moved. Then an older man at the edge of the crowd spoke up. Let them go, Jacob. We don't need trouble with the army. He ain't active duty no more, Jacob shot back. Look at him. He's discharged. Still wore the uniform, still fought. Let it be. The crowd wavered. Some of the men shifted backward. Others held their ground. Caldwell didn't wait for them to decide. He placed his hand on Josiah's shoulder and pushed forward. The crowd parted reluctantly, giving them just enough space to pass through. They walked out of town without looking back. Caldwell kept his hand on his weapon until the last building disappeared from view. Once they were clear, Josiah let out a shaky breath. They were going to hurt us. Maybe, but they didn't. Why not? Fear, uncertainty. People are brave in groups, but most of them don't actually want blood on their hands. They walked in silence for another hour before finding an abandoned farm. The main house had collapsed, but the barn still stood. Caldwell checked it carefully before letting Josiah inside. The hayloft offered some protection from the wind. Caldwell spread out the blanket and helped Josiah climb up. The boy curled into a ball immediately, shivering. Caldwell sat near the edge of the loft, watching the road through gaps in the barn walls. His mind drifted to battles he'd survived, to friends who hadn't. He remembered a young private named Marcus, who'd taken a bullet meant for him at Cold Harbor. Remembered holding the boy as he bled out, whispering promises that his death meant something. But what had it meant? The war was over, and here Caldwell sat in a freezing barn, hiding from the very people he'd fought to protect. Corporal? Josiah's voice was small in the darkness. Yeah? In the war, did you kill a lot of men? Caldwell was quiet for a long moment. Yes. Does it get easier? No. Anyone who says it does is lying. Then why did you do it? Because if I didn't, they would have killed me, and they would have killed the men fighting beside me. Caldwell paused. Same reason I killed those hunters. It was them or us. Josiah pulled the blanket tighter. My sister told me killing was wrong. No matter what. Your sister was a good person, but the world isn't built for good people. It's built for people who survive. The boy didn't respond. After a while, his breathing slowed into the rhythm of sleep. Caldwell kept watch through the night. Near dawn, he heard horses on the road. Distant voices. Men organizing, searching. The next morning, they left before sunrise. They moved carefully, avoiding roads now. Caldwell used skills learned during reconnaissance missions, reading terrain, finding natural cover, moving without leaving obvious tracks. They traveled for 2 more days. The weather turned colder. Snow began falling again. Josiah's lips went blue, but he pushed forward. On the 3rd day, as the sun started its descent toward the horizon, Caldwell saw it, smoke rising from chimneys in the distance. More than a dozen columns, thin and gray against the darkening sky. "We're close," he told Josiah. The boy looked up, hope flickering across his exhausted face. They approached as moonlight broke through the clouds. The settlement sat in a small valley, protected by hills on 3 sides. Caldwell could make out buildings now. Homes, a church, people moving between structures, a black settlement. A place where Josiah might finally be safe. The settlement came alive with the dawn. Caldwell and Josiah stood at the edge of Northwood, watching smoke curl from chimneys as families stirred inside their homes. The buildings were simple but sturdy, wood frames weathered by seasons but maintained with care. A small schoolhouse sat near the center, its bell tower reaching toward the gray sky. Beyond it, farmland stretched in neat rows, dormant under snow. A woman emerged from the nearest house. She wore a thick shawl wrapped around her shoulders and carried a water bucket. When she saw them, she stopped. Her eyes moved from Caldwell's worn Union coat to Josiah's thin frame. "Help you with something?" Her voice was measured, neither welcoming nor hostile. "Looking for Elder Miriam," Caldwell said. "We need to speak with her." The woman studied them for another moment. Then she set down her bucket and gestured toward the largest building. "She'll be in the meeting house, preparing for morning prayers." They crossed the settlement slowly. People emerged from homes, preparing for the day's work. A few children played in the snow despite the cold. An older man chopped wood outside his barn. Everyone noticed the strangers. Everyone watched. The meeting house door stood open. Inside, a woman in her 60s arranged wooden benches. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. She looked up as they entered. "Morning. Elder Miriam?" Caldwell asked. "That's right." She straightened, brushing dust from her apron. "And you are?" "Corporal Isaiah Caldwell, Union Army. Discharged." He placed a hand on Josiah's shoulder. "This is Josiah. He escaped from a plantation in Virginia. I've been helping him travel north." Miriam's expression shifted. She moved closer, studying Josiah's face. "How old are you, child?" 11, ma'am," Josiah said quietly. "You traveled all this way alone?" "Not alone anymore." Josiah glanced up at Caldwell. Miriam's eyes returned to Caldwell. "Why bring him here?" "He's looking for family. An aunt named Naomi. Last we heard, she might be living in this settlement." Something changed in Miriam's face, a softness mixed with sorrow. "Naomi? What was her family name?" "I don't know," Josiah admitted. "My mama just said Aunt Naomi lived up north. Said she'd found freedom." Miriam was quiet for a long moment. Then she knelt down in front of Josiah, bringing herself to his eye level. "Child, there was a Naomi here. Naomi Freeman. She came to us about 2 years back. Worked as a seamstress. Good woman. Strong faith." Josiah's face lit up. "Can I see her?" Miriam's hand touched his arm gently. "Baby, she passed 3 months ago. Fever took her during the autumn. We buried her in the grove behind the church." The hope drained from Josiah's face. His legs seemed to weaken. Caldwell caught him before he stumbled. "No," Josiah whispered. "No, she can't. Mama said she was here. Mama said—" His voice broke. Tears spilled down his cheeks. Miriam pulled him into an embrace, and he collapsed against her, sobbing. His whole body shook with grief, not just for the aunt he'd never meet, but for everything he'd lost. His sister, his mother, the home that had been a prison but still held everyone he'd ever loved. Miriam held him, her hand stroking his back. She murmured words of comfort that Caldwell couldn't quite hear. After a while, Josiah's sobs quieted to shaky breaths. Miriam looked up at Caldwell. "You killed men to protect this boy?" "3 bounty hunters. They caught up to us at an abandoned farmhouse near the border." "And you expect those deaths won't bring consequences?" "I expect they will. That's why I need to get him somewhere safer than this." Miriam helped Josiah sit on a bench, then stood to face Caldwell fully. "There's nowhere safer for our people than communities like this. We protect our own here. With respect, Elder, I've seen how fast protection crumbles when the wrong people come calling. Then you've been around the wrong communities." Her voice was firm. "We've held this land for 15 years, through slave catchers, through raids, through drought and disease. We're still here." Before Caldwell could respond, the door opened. A man entered, thin, nervous-looking, with darting eyes. He nodded quickly at Miriam. "Morning, Elder. Just wanted to check if you needed anything for services." "We're fine, Daniel. Thank you." The man's eyes lingered on Caldwell and Josiah before he left. Miriam watched him go, her expression unreadable. Then she turned back to Caldwell. "You look like you haven't eaten properly in days. Neither has the boy. Come, let's get food in you both." She led them to a communal kitchen where several women prepared breakfast. Word spread quickly through the settlement. By midday, everyone knew about the soldier and the escaped boy. Caldwell earned some measure of trust by helping repair a fence that had collapsed under heavy snow. He worked alongside 2 men who asked careful questions about the war, about battles fought, about what freedom meant to someone who'd fought for it. Josiah stayed close to Miriam. She showed him where Naomi was buried, a simple wooden marker in a grove of bare trees. The boy stood there for a long time, silent. That evening, the settlement gathered for dinner in the meeting house. Long tables were set with simple but plentiful food. Families sat together, their voices filling the room with warmth that pushed back against the winter cold outside. Caldwell and Josiah sat near the end of one table. Miriam sat across from them, ensuring they felt welcomed. The food was good, better than anything Caldwell had tasted in months. Cornbread, stewed vegetables, salt pork. Josiah ate slowly, his appetite returning for the first time since learning about his aunt. A young girl sitting nearby asked him if he knew how to read. He shook his head. She promised to teach him if he stayed. For a moment, the room felt safe, like a place where they could rest, where Josiah could grow up without fear. Then the hoofbeats started, distant at first, multiple horses moving fast. The conversation in the room faltered. People turned toward the windows. Caldwell was already standing, his hand moving to his revolver. The hoofbeats grew louder. The hoofbeats thundered closer, shaking the windows of the meeting hall. Everyone rose from the tables at once. Mothers pulled children close. Men moved toward the walls where tools hung, axes, hammers, anything that could serve as a weapon. The warm safety of moments before evaporated like steam. Caldwell's hand remained on his revolver. His eyes tracked the sound, counting horses. At least a dozen, maybe more. "Stay behind me," he told Josiah. The boy's face had gone pale. His hands gripped the edge of the table. Elder Miriam walked toward the door, her movements calm despite the tension crackling through the room. "Everyone stay inside. Let me speak with them first." "Elder," one of the men started. "I said stay inside." She pushed through the door into the cold night air. Caldwell followed despite her order, keeping several paces behind. Other men from the settlement joined him, forming a loose line across the meeting hall's entrance. The riders came into view. Torches lit their faces, casting harsh shadows. They wore a mix of clothing, some in Confederate gray that should have been abandoned years ago, others in civilian clothes with militia armbands. All were armed. The man at the front rode a large black horse, He was broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, with the bearing of someone who believed deeply in his own authority. When he spoke, his voice carried across the settlement square with practiced projection. "I am Captain Harlan Briggs. I speak for the citizens of this county, who demand law and order be restored." Miriam stood her ground. "This is private property, Captain. You have no jurisdiction here. A black man murdered 3 citizens of Virginia on their lawful business. That gives me all the jurisdiction I need." Briggs's eyes swept the line of men behind Miriam, settling on Caldwell. "That him?" "This settlement is protected under Pennsylvania law," Miriam said. "We are free people living on land we own. You cannot—" "Can't I?" Briggs leaned forward in his saddle. "Those men he killed had families, had rights. Rights that don't disappear just because a colored soldier decides he's above the law." "They were hunting a child," Caldwell called out. "Hunting him to drag him back into bondage." Briggs smiled without warmth. "So you admit it? You're the one who killed them." "I defended an 11-year-old boy from men who would have beaten him to death or worse. That boy is stolen property. Those men were lawfully recovering him. That boy is a human being." Caldwell's voice cut through the cold air. "And those men died because they wouldn't let him stay one." Murmurs rippled through the militia. Several riders shifted in their saddles. Briggs raised a hand to silence them. "You wear that Union coat like it means something," Briggs said, "like it makes you special. But the war's over, soldier. The world you fought for isn't the one you're living in." "Maybe not yet," Caldwell replied. "But it's coming." "Is that so?" Briggs's smile widened. "You think hiding behind these people makes you safe? You think I won't drag you out of here and put a rope around your neck for what you've done?" Elder Miriam stepped directly in front of Briggs's horse. "You'll do no such thing. Not on this land. Not while we stand here." The other settlement members moved forward, closing ranks behind her. Women joined the men. Even the older children stepped outside, their faces set with determination. Within moments, a wall of people stood between the militia and Caldwell. Briggs surveyed them, his jaw tight. "You're making a mistake." "The mistake would be letting you take an innocent man," Miriam said. "We know what justice looks like in your world. We've seen enough of it to last lifetimes." The two groups faced each other in tense silence. Wind whistled through the bare trees. Snow began to fall again, light flakes drifting down through the torchlight. Finally, Briggs pulled his horse back. "This isn't over." "I expect not," Miriam said, "but it's over for tonight." Briggs turned his horse. The militia followed, their torches retreating into the darkness. The sound of hoofbeats faded slowly, swallowed by distance and wind. The settlement held its position until the last rider disappeared. Then, collectively, they exhaled. Some embraced. Others whispered prayers of thanks. Caldwell approached Miriam. "They'll come back. I know. When they do, it won't be like this. They won't give you the chance to talk them down." Miriam looked at him steadily. "Then we'll be ready." But Caldwell knew better. He'd seen what happened when outnumbered people tried to stand against organized violence. He'd seen entire towns burned, families scattered, bodies left as warnings. The settlement returned inside, their relief palpable but fragile. Guards were posted at the edges of the community. Families went to their homes, barring doors and windows. Caldwell couldn't sleep. He sat in the meeting hall with Josiah, watching the boy finally drift off, wrapped in borrowed blankets near the dying fire. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the militia's tracks. Hours passed. The settlement grew quiet. Guards changed shifts. The fire burned down to embers. Caldwell dozed for just a moment. That's when the screaming started. He was on his feet instantly, revolver in hand. Orange light flickered through the windows, not from inside, but outside. Fire. The meeting hall's door burst open. Someone shouted about flames, about men with torches, about the church burning. Caldwell ran outside with others. The church across the square was engulfed, flames climbing its walls and licking at the roof. Smoke poured into the night sky. People rushed toward it with buckets, trying to save what they could. Then Caldwell realized the church was a diversion. He spun around. The meeting hall behind him was already burning. Flames crawled up one wall where torches had been thrown through broken windows. Smoke billowed through the doorway. "Josiah!" Caldwell ran back inside. The smoke was already thick, choking. He could barely see. Heat pressed against his face. Somewhere in the chaos, he heard shouting. Different voices, unfamiliar ones. Through the smoke he saw shapes. Men. 3 of them, wearing kerchiefs over their faces. They had Josiah between them. The boy was struggling, kicking, screaming Caldwell's name. Caldwell lunged forward. A burning beam crashed down, cutting off his path. He tried to go around it, but the smoke was too dense. His lungs burned, his eyes watered. He couldn't see. "Caldwell!" Josiah's scream tore through the roar of flames. Caldwell pushed forward, coughing, choking on smoke. His boot caught on debris. He stumbled, fell to one knee. When he looked up again, the shapes were gone. He crawled toward the door, following the rush of cold air. Outside, people shouted. Water splashed against burning wood. Someone grabbed his arm, pulling him away from the collapsing structure. "The boy!" Caldwell rasped. "They took the boy!" But his voice was lost in the chaos. The meeting hall groaned, its frame buckling. The roof collapsed with a shower of sparks that lit the falling snow like dying stars. Caldwell tried to run toward the forest, toward where he thought they'd gone, but his legs wouldn't hold him. He fell forward into the snow, coughing violently, his lungs screaming for clean air. People surrounded him. Hands lifted him. Voices spoke words he couldn't process. The fires burned through what remained of the night. By the time they were extinguished, both the meeting hall and the church were ruins, skeletal frames of charred wood standing against the dawn. Caldwell knelt in the ashes where the meeting hall had stood. His face was blackened with soot. His clothes stank of smoke. His throat felt like he'd swallowed glass. Survivors gathered around him, their faces hollow with shock and fear. Children cried. Women held each other. Men stared at the destruction with helpless rage. Elder Miriam knelt beside Caldwell. Ash streaked her face. Her shawl was singed at the edges. "They took him," Caldwell said. His voice was barely a whisper. "They took him right out from under me." Miriam placed a hand on his shoulder but said nothing. What was there to say? Caldwell forced himself to stand. His legs shook. His vision swam. But he walked to the edge of the settlement, to where the forest began. Footprints led into the trees, small ones, dragged between larger boot prints. The tracks were fresh, the snow around them still loose and uncompacted. Josiah's footprints were still warm in the snow. Pre-dawn gray washed over the settlement like dirty water. Caldwell stood at the forest's edge, his eyes fixed on the tracks leading into darkness. Behind him, the ruins of the meeting hall still smoked, sending thin black ribbons into the colorless sky. His lungs ached with every breath. His throat felt raw, stripped clean by smoke and screaming. But none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the small set of footprints disappearing into the trees. Footprints that belonged to a boy who'd trusted him, a boy he'd failed to protect. Survivors moved through the settlement behind him, salvaging what they could from the wreckage. Their voices were hushed, broken, the sound of grief without the luxury of time to properly feel it. Work came first. Morning would have to wait. Someone approached from behind. Caldwell didn't turn. "You need water," Elder Miriam said. She held out a canteen. "And food. You won't help him by collapsing halfway through the marsh." Caldwell took the canteen. The water was cold, painful against his burned throat. He drank anyway. "I should have known," he said. His voice came out hoarse, barely recognizable. "Should have seen it coming. You're not a prophet, Corporal. You're a man. I'm a soldier. Was a soldier. I'm supposed to anticipate the enemy's movements. Supposed to protect my people." He gestured toward the smoking ruins. "This is what protection looks like when I'm in charge." Miriam stepped beside him, her eyes following the tracks into the forest. "You think taking blame changes anything? You think guilt brings that boy back? Guilt is all I've got right now." "Then you're not thinking clearly." Her voice was firm, cutting through his self-recrimination like a blade. "Those men who took him, they planned this. They waited until we felt safe, until we let our guard down. This wasn't your failing. This was their deliberate cruelty." Caldwell's hands tightened around the canteen. "I told him he'd be safe. Promised him. And you'll keep that promise, but not like this." She turned to face him fully. "Not by standing here drowning in what you should have done. He needs what you can still do." Caldwell's knees buckled. The exhaustion hit him all at once. Days of running, fighting, protecting, losing. His vision blurred. He felt himself falling. Miriam caught him, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman her age. She held him steady until his legs remembered how to support his weight. "No child should be left to the wolves," she said quietly. "Not on our watch. Not ever." Caldwell straightened slowly. He looked at her, seeing the same exhaustion in her face, the same grief, but also the same unbreakable determination that had made her step in front of a militia captain's horse. "I need to go now," he said, "while the tracks are fresh." "You won't go alone." Movement behind them drew Caldwell's attention. 5 settlers approached, carrying packs and weapons. Samuel, the blacksmith. Thomas, who'd fought in a colored regiment before settling here. Ruth and her brother Daniel, not the Daniel who'd betrayed them, but another family entirely. And young Marcus, barely 17, but built like someone much older. Samuel handed Caldwell a rifle. "We're coming with you." "This isn't your fight." "The hell it isn't," Thomas said. "They burned our church, our meeting hall, took a child from our care. That makes it our fight." Ruth nodded. "We stand together or we fall alone. That's how we've always survived." Caldwell looked at each of them in turn. He saw fear in their faces. Yes, but also resolve. The kind that only came from people who'd already lost too much to lose anything more. "We do this smart," he said, his voice steadying. "Military formation. Thomas, you know how to move in formation? Learned from men who learned from you, probably." "Good. Samuel, Marcus, you two take flanks. Ruth and Daniel, center position. Stay close enough to communicate, but spread enough that one ambush can't take us all." Caldwell's mind shifted into the tactical mode that had kept him alive through 2 years of war. "We move quiet. Watch for signs. They're moving fast, but they'll leave traces." He turned to Miriam. "If we're not back in 3 days, you'll be back," she said. "And you'll have that boy with you." Caldwell wanted to believe her certainty, wanted to trust that something in this world could still work out right. But he'd seen too much to trust in anything, except what he could make happen himself. The tracking party moved into the forest as dawn began to break properly. The tracks were clear in the fresh snow. 3 sets of adult boots, 1 small pair dragged between them. The vigilantes weren't trying to hide their path. They didn't think anyone would follow. Didn't think a group of black settlers would dare. They were wrong. The marsh began 2 miles into the forest. The ground turned soft, treacherous. Ice formed over standing water in thin sheets that cracked under boots. The trees here grew twisted, their roots exposed like gnarled fingers. Caldwell knelt beside a patch of disturbed snow. A glove lay half buried, too small for an adult. He picked it up. The fabric was rough, homespun. Josiah's. "He's leaving signs," Ruth said softly. "Smart boy," Thomas agreed. Caldwell pocketed the glove. They moved forward. An hour later, They found a torn piece of fabric caught on a low branch, part of Josiah's blanket. The same blanket he'd carried from the plantation, the one Rachel had given him. Every piece they found confirmed two things. Josiah was alive, and he was terrified. The day wore on. The tracking party moved with steady precision, Caldwell calling quiet orders when the path became unclear. They found more signs, a scuff mark where Josiah had tried to slow their progress, a small handprint pressed into mud beside the trail. The boy was fighting even while being dragged, fighting to stay alive, to leave traces, to hold on until help arrived. Night fell quickly in the marsh. The temperature dropped. Ice thickened on the standing water. Caldwell called a halt. "We make camp here. No fire. Too visible. We eat cold rations and sleep in shifts." They settled into a small clearing, arranging themselves in a defensive circle. Caldwell took first watch, his rifle across his knees. The others fell into exhausted sleep around him. Ruth curled against her brother for warmth. Marcus wrapped himself in his coat. Samuel and Thomas lay back to back, sharing body heat. Caldwell stared up at the stars beginning to emerge through the bare tree branches. Somewhere ahead, Josiah was cold and scared, wondering if anyone was coming for him. "Hold on, boy," Caldwell whispered to the darkness. "Hold on." Morning light came slow over the marsh, pale and uncertain. Caldwell hadn't slept. His body had learned in the war to function without rest when necessary, running on something harder than energy, pure will wrapped around a single purpose. The others woke stiff and cold. No one complained. They ate hardtack and dried meat in silence, then moved out before the sun fully cleared the horizon. The tracks continued north, cutting through dense undergrowth and across frozen streams. The vigilantes had moved fast but carelessly, leaving broken branches and deep boot prints. They thought no one would follow, thought fear would keep the settlement cowering in its ashes. By midday, the trail led upward. The marsh gave way to rocky terrain, the ground rising toward a ridge that overlooked a frozen creek below. Caldwell raised his fist, signaling the group to halt. "What is it?" Samuel whispered. Caldwell pointed ahead. Through the bare trees, smoke rose in a thin column. A camp. They approached with extreme caution, using every scrap of cover. Caldwell moved like he'd been trained. Low, silent, eyes constantly scanning. The others followed his lead, mimicking his movements. The vigilante camp sat on the ridge's crest. 4 tents arranged in a loose circle around a central fire. 7 men visible, moving between tents or standing watch. And there, tied to a tree near the largest tent, was Josiah. The boy sat with his hands bound behind him, his face bruised. But he was alive, alert. His eyes tracked the movements of his captors with the same watchful intelligence that had kept him alive through everything else. Caldwell's chest tightened. Relief and rage mixed together until he couldn't tell them apart. "We wait until dusk," he said quietly. "They'll be tired then. Guards will be sloppy." "How do we approach?" Thomas asked. Caldwell sketched a rough map in the dirt with his finger. "Samuel and Marcus, you two circle to the east side. Ruth and Daniel, take the west. Thomas, you're with me on the north approach. We surround them completely. When I move, you move, silent and fast. Disable anyone who might raise an alarm." "And if they see us?" Ruth asked. "Then we fight. But we don't let them touch that boy again." They spent the afternoon positioning themselves, moving through the forest like shadows. Caldwell watched the camp, studying patterns. Which guard walked where? Who stayed close to Josiah? Who held weapons and who didn't? The vigilante leader was obvious. A broad man with a scarred face who moved through the camp like he owned it. Jonas Fielding, from the descriptions Caldwell had heard. A former Confederate irregular who'd never accepted surrender. The kind of man who turned peace into an excuse for different violence. As the sun dropped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple, Caldwell gave the signal. The settlers moved into position. Caldwell waited until full dusk settled over the ridge. Then he entered the camp alone. The first guard never saw him coming. Caldwell's hand clamped over the man's mouth as his other arm locked around the throat, cutting off air and sound. The guard struggled briefly, then went limp. Caldwell lowered him silently to the ground. The second guard stood near the fire, warming his hands. Caldwell approached from behind, his movements controlled and precise. A quick strike to the base of the skull. The guard dropped without a sound. Movement in the shadows told Caldwell his people were working too. Samuel appeared briefly, dragging an unconscious vigilante behind a tent. Marcus signaled success from across the camp. Caldwell moved toward Josiah. The boy's eyes widened when he saw him. Caldwell raised a finger to his lips. Josiah nodded, understanding instantly. Caldwell knelt behind the tree, working at the ropes binding Josiah's hands. The knots were tight, cruel. Whoever tied them had meant to hurt. The rope came free. Josiah flexed his fingers, wincing. "Can you walk?" Caldwell whispered. Josiah nodded. "Then stay close to—" "Well, well," the voice came from behind. "Wondered when you'd show up?" Caldwell turned slowly. Jonas Fielding stood 10 feet away, a pistol in his hand. 2 other vigilantes flanked him, rifles raised. "Figured a colored soldier might be stupid enough to track us," Jonas continued. "Didn't think you'd be dumb enough to walk right into camp." Caldwell stood, putting himself between Jonas and Josiah. "Let the boy go." "Let him go?" Jonas laughed. "Boy's worth good money. Plus, he's bait that already worked once. Your men are already down." Jonas glanced around, noticing for the first time how quiet the camp had become. His face darkened. "Don't matter. I got 3 guns pointed at you right now. And I got 5 pointed at you." The settlers emerged from shadows, weapons raised. Samuel on the left, Ruth and Daniel on the right. Thomas behind Jonas. Marcus appeared from behind a tent, his rifle steady. Jonas's eyes darted between them. Then he moved fast, grabbing Josiah and pulling the boy in front of him like a shield. The pistol pressed against Josiah's temple. "Everybody stops right there," Jonas said. "Or the boy dies." Josiah went rigid with fear. His eyes found Caldwell's, wide and desperate. Caldwell's mind worked through calculations. Distance, angles, risk. He'd made shots like this before, during the war, but never with stakes this high. "You won't shoot him," Caldwell said calmly. "Dead boy's worth nothing. Maybe not to you, but I'll happily put a bullet in him just to watch you live with it." Caldwell took a step forward. "I said stop." Another step. Jonas's hand trembled. The pistol shook against Josiah's head. Caldwell moved, not forward, sideways, pulling Jonas's aim off-center. His hand shot out, grabbing Jonas's wrist and twisting hard. Bone cracked. The pistol fell. Caldwell drove his shoulder into Jonas's chest, separating him from Josiah. They went down together, rolling across frozen ground. Jonas swung wild, connecting with Caldwell's jaw. Stars burst across Caldwell's vision, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. His fist drove into Jonas's face once, twice, 3 times. Gunfire cracked. The other vigilantes were shooting. Caldwell heard his people returning fire, heard shouts and crashes. Jonas's hand found a rock. He swung it at Caldwell's head. Caldwell blocked with his forearm, felt the impact rattle his bones. He drove his knee into Jonas's stomach, then grabbed the rock from his hand and brought it down hard. Jonas went still. The gunfire stopped. Caldwell looked up, breathing hard. 4 vigilantes lay on the ground, dead or unconscious. The settlers stood in a rough circle, weapons still raised. 1 vigilante remained standing, a young man, barely 20, his rifle on the ground at his feet. His hands were raised, shaking. Terror painted his face white. Josiah had crawled away from the fighting, pressed against a tree. Now he pushed to his feet and walked toward Caldwell. His steps were unsteady, but determined. "Don't," Josiah said. Caldwell looked at him. The boy's face was bruised, his clothes torn, but his eyes were clear. "Don't what?" "Don't kill him." Josiah pointed at the young vigilante. "Please, don't let them make you like them." Caldwell stared at the terrified man, saw how young he was, how his whole body shook with fear. This wasn't a hardened killer. This was someone who'd been pulled into something bigger and darker than he understood. "What's your name?" Caldwell asked. "C. Caleb. Caleb Finch. You know what you did here, Caleb? Taking a child? Burning a church?" I didn't want to. Jonas said we were just—" He said, "I don't care what Jonas said." Caldwell stood, every muscle aching. "You made choices. You followed a man who hurt people for sport." Caleb's legs buckled. He fell to his knees. "Please, don't kill me. Please." Caldwell looked at Josiah. The boy met his eyes steadily, waiting. Caldwell lowered his rifle. "Leave this ridge. Never come back. If I see you again, if I hear you've hurt anyone else, there won't be mercy a second time." Caleb scrambled backward, then turned and ran into the darkness. His footsteps crashed through undergrowth, growing fainter. Caldwell walked to Josiah and knelt down. "You hurt?" "I'm okay." Josiah's voice cracked. "I knew you'd come. I'm sorry it took so long. You came. That's what matters." Caldwell pulled the boy into a careful embrace, mindful of his bruises. Josiah buried his face against Caldwell's shoulder and finally let himself cry. The settlers gathered around them, forming a protective circle. No one spoke. There was nothing to say that the moment didn't already hold. After a long while, Caldwell stood, lifting Josiah with him. "Let's go home." They gathered what supplies they could from the camp, then began the trek north as stars appeared overhead, cold and distant, but somehow comforting in their constancy. The boy slept against his shoulder before they reached the first bend in the trail. Traveling slowly but safely along back roads, they reached New York State as winter sunlight returned. The journey had taken 3 more days, but these were different from the desperate flight that came before. No one pursued them now. The settlers who'd helped rescue Josiah traveled with them part of the way, then turned back toward Northwood to begin rebuilding what the fire had destroyed. Caldwell and Josiah continued north alone, but the solitude felt comfortable rather than dangerous. They slept in barns whose owners welcomed them. They ate meals at tables where no one asked questions that made Josiah flinch. Caldwell watched the boy begin to relax, bit by bit, like ice melting under cautious spring sun. On the morning of the 3rd day, they crested a hill and saw Clearwater Community spread out in the valley below. It was bigger than Northwood, much bigger. Dozens of houses lined neat streets. A schoolhouse sat at the center, its bell tower rising above surrounding rooftops. Fields stretched beyond the settlement, already showing signs of preparation for spring planting. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin, peaceful columns. "That's it," Caldwell said. "That's where we're going." Josiah stared at the settlement with wide eyes. "It's all black folks? Everyone. And they're free? Free as anyone can be." They walked down the hill together. As they entered the settlement's main street, people looked up from their work. A woman hanging laundry paused mid-motion. A man repairing a wagon wheel straightened. Children playing in a yard stopped their game. Caldwell felt Josiah press closer to his side, suddenly nervous under all those watching eyes. Then a woman stepped forward from the nearest house. She was perhaps 40, with silver threading through her dark hair and eyes that held both warmth and old grief. "Welcome," she said. "I'm Lorraine Carter. You look like you've traveled far." "From Pennsylvania," Caldwell replied. "My name's Isaiah Caldwell. This is Josiah." Lorraine's gaze moved to the boy, and something in her expression softened even further. "Hello, Josiah." Josiah managed a small nod. A man emerged from the house behind Lorraine, tall, broad-shouldered, with work-worn hands and a gentle face. "I'm Samuel Carter," he said. "Come inside. You both look like you could use a hot meal and a warm fire." The Carter home was modest but comfortable. Quilts covered the walls, books lined shelves built into the corners. A fire crackled in the hearth, filling the room with amber light and the scent of burning oak. Lorraine brought them bowls of thick stew and fresh bread. Caldwell and Josiah ate slowly, savoring every bite. It had been days since they'd had a proper meal. As they ate, Caldwell explained their journey, carefully editing out the worst violence, focusing instead on Josiah's courage and the community that had helped them. He mentioned that Josiah's aunt had passed, that the boy needed somewhere safe to stay. Samuel and Lorraine exchanged a long look. Some wordless communication passed between them. "We lost our son 5 years ago," Lorraine said quietly. "Slave catchers took him. We never saw him again." Josiah's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "We don't tell you that to make you sad," Samuel added. "We tell you so you understand. We know what it means to lose family. We know what it means to keep looking for them in every stranger's face." Lorraine reached across the table and placed her hand gently over Josiah's. "If you need a home, you have one here, for as long as you want it." Josiah looked at Caldwell, uncertainty written across his features. "These are good people," Caldwell said. "You'd be safe here." "What about you?" Josiah asked. "I'll stay for a while. Make sure you're settled." The spring months passed with surprising gentleness. Caldwell remained in Clearwater, initially planning to leave after a week or two, but finding reasons to extend his stay. Josiah needed time to adjust. The Carters needed help repairing their fence. The community was preparing fields for planting, and extra hands were welcome. Caldwell taught Josiah how to read maps, tracing routes with his finger, and explaining how to use landmarks and stars for navigation. They cleaned tools together in the Carters' shed, Caldwell showing the boy how to oil metal properly, how to sharpen blades at the correct angle. When the planting season began, Caldwell worked alongside Josiah in the fields, demonstrating how to space seeds, how to judge soil quality, how to protect young shoots from late frost. Josiah soaked up every lesson like parched earth absorbing rain. He asked questions constantly. Caldwell answered them all with patience he didn't know he possessed. The nightmares came less frequently. Josiah still woke sometimes, gasping and disoriented, but Lorraine was always there with soft words and steady comfort. Samuel taught him woodworking, showing him how to shape raw timber into useful things: bowls, handles, small carvings. The community embraced Josiah completely. Children his age invited him into their games. Teachers at the schoolhouse made space for him in their classroom. Older folks shared stories that made him laugh. Caldwell watched the transformation with something that felt dangerously close to peace. But as spring deepened toward summer, he began to feel the pull of unfinished business. Letters arrived at the settlement from Union veterans organizing in larger cities: Philadelphia, Boston, New York. They were forming advocacy groups, pushing for Reconstruction policies that would protect freed slaves and punish Confederate war criminals. The work called to him, the sense that there were larger battles still to fight. One evening, he sat with the Carters after Josiah had gone to bed. "I'm thinking of leaving soon," Caldwell said. Lorraine nodded slowly. "We wondered when you'd feel that pull." "You could stay," Samuel offered. "Clearwater could use someone with your skills, your experience." "I appreciate that, truly. But there's work I need to do. Work that might help prevent other boys from needing to run like Josiah did." "The veterans groups," Lorraine said. "Yes. Will you tell him?" "Tomorrow." The next morning, Caldwell found Josiah in the garden behind the Carter house, pulling weeds from between rows of young bean plants. The boy worked carefully, methodically, the way Caldwell had taught him. "I hope you found that story powerful," leave a like on the video, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. I have handpicked 2 stories for you that are even more powerful. Have a great day.